In order to solve this trig equation, we're going to need to replace cosine squared. The main idea is to get all of the trig functions to be the same, either all sines or all cosines. And we do have a trig identity for cosine squared that it's equal to 1 minus sine squared. And so we'll substitute that in right here. And then recopy the rest, sine of theta, and then equals 1. And now we have a quadratic function basically. We've got a squared term, a non-squared term, and a constant. So if I put these in order, it's going to be negative 2 sine squared from distributing the 2, and then negative sine of theta. And then there's going to be a 2 from this, and then I should subtract 1. So that's going to be 2 minus 1 is 1, and now it's set equal to 0. And we could try to factor this, or we could use the quadratic formula. Factoring works sometimes, quadratic formula works all the time, so I'm going to use quadratic formula. In algebra, we would say that this was an x squared term and this was an x term, and then here we would have x equals. Well, instead we have sine of theta. So sine of theta is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a and times c, all divided by 2 times a. So this turns out to be a positive 8 and a positive 1, so it's going to be the square root of 9. So we've got the negatives canceling. We've got the square root of 9 is 3, and that right there means that it was factorable, that this was factorable whenever this turns out to be a perfect square. And it's still that sine of theta equals that. So a 1 plus 3 would be 4 divided by negative 1. So sine of theta equals a 4 divided by negative 4 equals a negative 1. Or it's going to be 1 minus 3, which is negative 2 divided by negative 4. So we need to know when is sine equal to negative 1 and when is sine equal to a half. Well, if you take a look at the graph for sine from 0 to 2 pi, so right here is when it's going to be equal to negative 1. And so this is 0, in the middle is pi, and this is 2 pi. So for it being down here, that's going to be 3 pi over 2. So we get one solution, that it's 3 pi over 2. And then when is sine equal to a half? Well, 1/2 is right here. And if we use the calculator to find out sine inverse of 1/2, it turns out to be this decimal. If you divide that by pi and then change it to a fraction, you'll see it's pi over 6. So that's saying if you go over to the graph and down here, then this is going to be at pi over 6, which is a solution. And now we need one other solution. When you go over to the graph over here, it's also at a height of 1/2. And then it's just to the left of pi. And since it's a symmetric graph, this length is pi over 6, so this has to be a length of pi over 6. And so it's going to be pi minus pi over 6. So the third solution, pi minus pi over 6, is 6 pi over 6 minus 1, so it's 5 pi over 6. And then to verify, go ahead and graph it. And look at the graph from 0 to 2 pi, and there are sure enough 3 solutions. That one should be pi over 6, so trace pi divided by 6, that one's correct. And 3 pi divided by 2, that one's correct. And then for the middle one, that must be the 5 pi over 6. Yes.